about the race issue, and they're comparing Karmelo Anthony to Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks didn't fatally stab someone. You know, this does not apply, okay? Greetings, it's Tieesha, and today we're going to talk about a really tough topic, but it's all over the news, all over social media. Unfortunately, today we're going to talk about a tragedy out of Frisco, Texas, and it was between two 17-year-olds. And the first thing that got to me was, I'm like, if this is an incident between juveniles, we're seeing their photographs, their address, their names, you know, things like that. So I thought that was a little weird. However, looking at some other stuff, we were told that 17-year-olds are considered adults when it comes to the state of Texas. Of course, I do not live there, have never lived there, not familiar with the laws of Texas. So I had to do a little bit of research before I got my thoughts together to make this video. We're going to go to KPIC4 News out of Texas. And the headline of this report is Teen Charged in Fatal Texas Stabbing Told Police, I'm not alleged, I did it. In Frisco, Texas, the police report for the teen accused of fatally stabbing 17-year-old Austin Metcalf during a high school track meet in Frisco, Texas, has revealed new details about the suspect's statements to police following his arrest. On the left, you have the suspect, Karmelo Anthony, and on the right, you have the victim, Austin Metcalf. Anthony, also 17. They're both teenagers. You know, according to what we know, like teenagers, it was really odd to see them presented as adults. That was one thing that I still have a little trouble with, but let's just keep that in mind that these are teenagers. Karmelo Anthony was charged with murder of Metcalf, who was stabbed in the chest during an altercation at the event on April 2nd. According to Frisco police, the two were involved in a confrontation before the fatal stabbing. And this is the only site that I found that actually provided the entire redacted police report. So we're going to dive into the police report and look at this. Now, other times on this channel, I bring up police misconduct where the police got it wrong, different faults. But this time, I must admit, the police actually got it right. Their police report was written very well. It was just amazing. Okay, their police report, Frisco, Texas Police Department. And to admit, only thing I heard of a Frisco was Hardee's Frisco Burger. I never heard of Frisco, Texas. So this was something that was new to me. But on the front page, it's 7 pages of police report. One thing that I saw that was being shared on social media was only like pages 1, 2, and 7. The full police report by other people sharing did not include the full police report. So I'm going to leave a link. I'm going to leave a link in the description so that you can go to the same site where I obtained it and download the PDF and read it for yourself and have your copy as well. So it starts out with the report from Officer Eduardo Cortez, and this was on April 2nd, 1704, 5:04 p.m. And he states that on April 4th, 2025, at 10:01 hours, I, Staley School Resource Officer E. Cortez, heard over the radio dispatch call out of stabbing at David Q. Kendall Stadium. Gave the address. FPD call notes indicated that an athlete was stabbed. The suspect was reported as a black male wearing a gray hoodie and blue sweatpants. I immediately left my office and ran across Staley Middle School. So the stadium, the high school, and the middle school all must be next door to each other. So, because he was able to respond on foot versus getting his patrol vehicle. As I entered the stadium, 2 high school age students informed me that the victim was on the north end of the stadium by the bleachers under a Memorial High School tent. I did not identify these students. Yeah, I mean, he noted that because while he's trying to run and preserve evidence, find what's going on, the suspect on scene, if it's a stabbing in progress, you know, he don't have time to say, stop, let me get your contact information, you know, so that's expected, okay? Next, I proceeded towards the north end of the stadium visitor side on foot. As I got closer to the north end, I could see Memorial High School tent with multiple individuals under the tent. Once I arrived onto the north side of the bleachers, an adult male who was on the track pointed out the suspect. I was not able to identify that witness. The individual that was pointed out to me was a black male wearing a gray hooded sweater and dark colored Nike pants. The suspect at this point was on the track on the north end. There was a chain link fence that separated me from the suspect. I gave the suspect instructions to keep his hands in the air. During this time, the suspect said verbally out loud, "I was protecting myself." And that's important that he noted that, because in something like this, when you're taking someone into custody, the issue of Miranda would come up. Like, was he talking? Did you ask him anything? This is important to note that, hey, I didn't ask him any questions. This was a spontaneous utterance to me. Because, when it comes for Miranda, you need cops, custody, and questioning. So at this point in time, the suspect was not free to go. If an officer is giving you directions, you're not free to leave. Fixing to be in custody and, questioning, but none of that was happening. So argument towards Miranda does not apply. So the rest of the questioning that Officer Cortez did ask would be in result of officer safety. Okay. It should be noted that I had not questioned him about the incident when he made that comment. I asked him if he had any weapons. He said no. I patted him down, patted him down for weapons while we were walking along the fence. I did not locate any on his person. I instructed a male to continue walking along the fence, which he complied, towards an area where there was an opening in the fence that led off the track. While walking him back onto the track, the suspect also said he put his hands on me. I then detained the suspect in handcuffs, handcuffed behind his back, and sat him down on the ground. Officer A. Ricky had arrived on the scene at that time. I conducted another pat down of his person and then searched his person after he gave me consent. That's important too, because at this time he's only detained. He's only detained right now. So going and searching, pulling out money, pulling out, whatever's in his pockets, unless you can, from the outside, after you do a pat down, you can articulate without manipulating that this is what you think it is, and you can go in and retrieve that item. So he said that he got consent. So he must have asked, "Can I search you?" Okay. The suspect then responds and says, "I'm not alleged, I did it." Next, Officer Ricky and I walked the suspect to vehicle number 2412. This is Officer A. Ricky's patrol vehicle, which was on the northeast gate of Coy Kendall Stadium. As we're walking to the squad car, the suspect was emotional and said he put his hands on me. I told him not to. I did not question the suspect about the incident while he was escorted to the patrol vehicle. And that's important, because if this wasn't the right person, and why would this person make comments towards the incident if they weren't involved? So this stands out as well, that likely this is the individual that was involved in this incident. I searched his person once again and had him sit in the backseat driver's side of patrol vehicle 2412. While the suspect was in the back seat, I noticed fresh blood on his left middle finger. I verbally acknowledged that I saw the blood out loud so that it may be captured on my body-worn camera. This was all captured on the Exxon camera. It should be noted that the suspect asked me, "Is he going to be okay?" while he was in the back seat. I then identified the suspect. He provided his name and date of birth verbally as Karmelo Anthony, black male, with the date of birth, which I ran through FPD dispatch. Officer J. Hancock arrived on scene and remained with me and the suspect at this point. Karmelo was then checked via school database for FISD students to also confirm his identity. The identifying information he provided matched the individual I had in custody, Karmelo Anthony. Next, I advised Sergeant Holland to transport the subject to the Frisco PD jail. Now, this is a little sketchy. I mean, was he under arrest? Did you tell him he was under arrest at that time? Because all I see here is that he's just detained. That's just my thing. Like, I'm going to tell someone, "Hey, you are in custody. Dispatch, one in custody, but it's been a 17-year-old and it's a male." If I was an officer at that time, I was like, okay, I'm going to give them mileage. But did he know that he was in custody? So all I see here was detained. Unless, I don't know what else. I would have had some people come and do a show up, identify him, things like that to confirm. But I would not have just like, okay, I got this person, take him away. I would not have done that. I then identified, Upon arriving at the Frisco jail, Karmelo was escorted into the intake area. FPD jail staff changed him out into jail attire. I remained with the jail staff the entire time that he changed over. So he was being processed. The clothes that Karmelo was wearing was placed in FPD paper evidence bag. The clothes remained in my possession from this point on. Upon Karmelo being placed in the jail cell, I continued to keep possession of the clothes. I returned to my patrol vehicle 2412 along with Officer Hancock, which was in the FPD Sally Port, and placed Karmelo's clothes in the back trunk area. I drove patrol vehicle 2412 out of the Sally Port and parked the squad car in FPD patrol parking area. Karmelo's clothes remained in the trunk of vehicle 2412. So with this, they're establishing chain of custody. So at no point in time was this officer gave custody to another officer. He stayed with him because he wanted those clothes for the DNA blood splatter evidence. FPD crime scene technician Kay Dillard then took possession of Karmelo's clothes. I added my body-worn camera video, should have been video, to the case. I have no further information to report. This is not out of the ordinary when it comes to like a major crime. The crime scene technicians would come in, photograph, measure, document, take possession, and process all the evidence. If it's something, or if this department allowed for evidence to process the scene, let's say it's a past burglary or tampering with auto, stuff like that, officers usually process the crime scene and submit all the evidence. But in this time, there's a crime scene technician or technicians that responded. So this was really good in documenting the chain of custody of the clothing, and the initial officer on scene with the body-worn camera recording, because they may be able to go back and see those three people that directed the officer where to go, may be able to use that video to go back to identify them as potential witnesses. All right, the next report comes from Officer Allison Rickey, or it could be Ricci. On April 2nd at 10:01 hours, I, Officer Rickey, badge number 3806, was wearing a full Frisco police uniform, and I was operating a fully marked Frisco police vehicle 2412. At about that time, I was dispatched a report of a stabbing at David Kuykendall Stadium. Frisco police dispatch advised the athlete had been stabbed. The suspect was described as a black male wearing a gray hoodie sweatshirt and blue sweatpants. I responded code 3 from the area of El Dorado Parkway and Frisco Street. I arrived on scene approximately 10:05 hours. When I arrived on scene, I approached the track and field area and saw Officer Cortez, the first officer, kneeling next to a black male wearing a gray hooded sweatshirt and blue sweatpants. The male, later identified as Karmelo Anthony, was in handcuffs and seated on the sidewalk by the entrance to the track. As I approached Officer Cortez stated Anthony was the alleged suspect. Anthony then made a spontaneous statement that stated, "I am not alleged, I did it." A confession. Officer Cortez conducted a pat search of Anthony's person to assure that he did not have any weapons and found nothing of evidentiary value. Officer Cortez and I then walked Anthony to my pre-search patrol vehicle, and Anthony was seated in the rear driver's side compartment of my vehicle. That's important because at that time, they had not found the alleged weapon or the alleged knife that was used. So this is important when officers, because with your patrol car, you need to thoroughly search your patrol vehicle at the start of your shift. And if anyone is in the back, once you do a pre-search before they get in, and you search again when they get out, because I've had people try to ditch stuff in my car, and I'm like, no, this was not in here prior to my shift. And also my car had a camera system. So it's like, no, this was not in here. So because they had not found anything on his person, it's likely that it may be concealed somewhere, or it's likely that it was ditched. So this was very important to note. While walking to my patrol vehicle, Anthony made another spontaneous statement and asked what happened if what happened could be considered self-defense. I replied by telling Anthony that I did not know what happened. It should be noted the in-car camera in my vehicle was activated prior to Anthony being placed in my patrol vehicle. While Officer Cortez assisted Anthony into my patrol vehicle, I noticed Anthony had red blood on his left middle finger. I grabbed my department-issued camera and took a photograph of Anthony's hands. I later uploaded the photograph to the crime scene folder under this case number. Officer Cortez remained with my patrol vehicle, and Anthony and I and Anthony, while I provided assistance with scene security. Nothing further from this officer. This was another great narrative because it took you on the sequence of events. Also included important information. Now, I did note that Officer Ricky was wearing a body-worn camera, but still provided great information in regards to those spontaneous utterances, searching and pre-searching her patrol vehicle to ensure that nothing was in there or nothing was left in there, and also confirming what Officer Cortez observed with the blood on the finger. So this was pretty good. The next narrative is from Officer Will Otis. States that on Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025, around 10:01 hours, Frisco Police Department officers were dispatched to Frisco Independent School District, David Koikendall Stadium, in reference to a stabbing victim call. Frisco Police Department Emergency Communications was receiving an emergency call regarding an athlete that was stabbed. The originally unknown assailant was a black male wearing a gray hoodie and blue sweatpants. He had a goatee and short hair. The subject was possibly wearing Centennial High School attire, as it was believed he was a student there for the sporting event. This had all taken place on the visitor side of the stadium, the north side, and the victim was under the Memorial High School tent in the bleachers. At around the same time, School Resource Officer Cortez arrived on scene and began assisting the victim, trainers, and other parties. Officer Cortez also advised on the radio that he had the suspect. Sergeant Otis was working in the 50 sector as sergeant, and he was in full Frisco Police Department uniform with distinct patches and badge and a police duty belt. He was also in a marked Frisco Police Department vehicle 2315. He was relatively close to the call and placed himself on it at 10:02 hours and responded to the call with his patrol vehicle's overhead emergency lights and sirens activated soon. He arrived to the call around 10:06 hours. Sergeant Otis arrived to the state and began walking up to the location. At around this time, Officer Cortez and Officer Ricky were walking a black male subject away from the stadium. The suspect was crying hysterically. Please see the other involved officers' narratives for their involvement. Sergeant Otis walked into the visitors' bleachers and observed the victim being treated by Frisco Fire Department personnel and the athletic trainers. The weather began to turn and it began heavily downpour raining at this time. Some of the FISE staff moved the memorial tent to cover the victim and the FFD personnel. Sergeant Otis began using his city-issued phone to snap crime scene photos to preserve as much of the scene as possible due to the weather and the large gathering of people who were involved in the incident. Other officers began to set up a crime scene with tape, moving non-essential personnel out of the immediate area. The officers on scene were informed that the knife that was used was tossed and was still believed to be somewhere close. Eventually, one of the witnesses said they remember seeing it on the bleachers still. This here is important because this Sergeant Otis noted that the weather was clear up until about after 10:06 when he arrived on scene. So the important thing is to preserve the evidence. So, he's taking pictures of where things were, where people were, where things were set up. Eventually, one of the witnesses said they remember seeing it on the bleacher still. Officer Schultz was able to locate the knife. It was located between rows 9 and 10 near seat 30, closest to the aisle, partially open. The rain began to come down again heavily, and it was determined that instead of moving the knife, the officers would cover it with a blue tarp. Sergeant Otis assisted in preserving the immediate crime scene as much as possible while the other personnel tended to the victim and eventually transported him. At around this time, Officer Wetzel had the crime scene log and began logging the individuals on the call to the best of his abilities. Lieutenant Crawford and Pemberton relieved Sergeant Otis of the crime scene. Sergeant Otis went back to the police department to download his body-worn camera and the photos he took with the city-issued phone. And this is important that officers use city-issued equipment. You heard Officer Ricky state that she used the department-issued camera, and now we have Sergeant Otis say that he used the city-issued phone. Because when it comes to evidence, or these things being called into evidence, it's like, okay, the phone can be taken and questioned. So it's best never to use your personal cell phone, your personal camera, because if you have crime scene photos, and next thing you know, you have pictures of your dog and you at the beach and stuff like that. No, and especially with this time of altering photographs and altering things like that, it's best to use what the department issued you so it could show and download the history. And you can see that there's nothing that could tamper with this evidence. So this is important to note that these items were taken on department issued equipment. Sergeant Otis' city issued file had a total of 33 photos that were used to document the incident scene. During the download, the initial photos formatting was incompatible with the crime scene folder. He re-downloaded the photos that he took, and they were able to be saved properly for preservation of evidence. There is nothing further to add to this report. That was great. That was wonderful. This is from Officer Taylor Wetzel, 0425 on 1704 hours at on Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. Officer T. Wetzel was assigned to work the patrol in City of Frisco. At approximately 10:02 hours, I responded to the report of a stabbing at David Coy Kendall Stadium located at this address. The original call note stated that an athlete had been stabbed in the chest and that the suspect that stabbed the victim goes to Centennial High School. Athletic trainers were on site providing care to the victim and advised he was not conscious and not breathing. The notes also indicated that the suspect was a Black male with a goatee and short hair wearing Centennial gear. I arrived on scene at approximately 10:06 hours. When I arrived on scene, I grabbed a roll of crime scene tape from my trunk and proceeded towards the visitors' bleachers where dispatch advised the victim was. While I was walking towards the visitors' bleachers, I was approached by a witness who identified himself as redacted, began telling me what happened, and I asked him where the stabbing occurred. The redacted witness advised it happened under the Memorial High School pop-up tent in the visitors' bleachers. I immediately informed Sergeant Otis where the witness stated the stabbing occurred and gave him the crime scene tape to start securing the crime scene area. I then had redacted moved to the walkway under the visitors' bleachers out of the rain to further speak with me. The following is a summary of my contact with redacted. Advised he was sitting under the Memorial High School pop-up tent with his team and was near the victim, Austin, and the suspect, who was later identified as Karmelo Anthony. Anthony was from Centennial High School and was sitting under the Memorial High School tent. Austin had told Anthony that he needed to move out from under their team's tent, and Anthony grabbed his bag, opened it, reached inside, and proceeded to tell Austin, "Touch me and see what happens." No one really thought Anthony really had any weapons in his bag, and Austin proceeded to touch Anthony. And Anthony told Austin to punch him and see what happens. A short time later, Austin grabbed Anthony to tell him to move, and Anthony pulled out what redacted recalled as a black knife and stabbed Austin in the chest, then ran away. Austin began grabbing his chest and telling everyone to get help. Redacted advised he did not know Anthony's name, but another Memorial Track member, Redacted, was friends with Anthony and he could identify Anthony. Described Anthony as a Black male, skinny, with possibly a goatee, short, puffy hair, wearing Centennial High School clothing. This concluded my contact with Redacted. Now, this here, I had to go and ask someone that is very familiar with track and field events and school sports and things like that. The rule is if you do not go to that school, if you're not representing that team, you are not to be in another school's tent. You're not. Because under that tent, the athletes have their personal belongings. And as we know, these days, when our children travel to these events and they're on the team, extracurricular sports, the equipment is not cheap. But also, too, they're traveling with their wallets, their IDs, their money, their phones. Phones are expensive at like $1,000. Phones, just their valuables, like everything is over there. Also, their drinks, their food, whatever they may have is under this tent, and they post someone there to keep an eye out for people's belongings. If you're not competing right then and there, look out for someone else's belongings. And it is a red flag to see someone else from another team with your team's belongings. Because look, all these people are bussed in to this one location, and someone potentially could take items, like use it as a free for all day, go through people's bags, and then get on your bus and you're out. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's wrong. These people don't know that their items have been taken until after they get back, and it's like, okay, there's hundreds of people here, maybe even thousands. So yeah, it's a rule to stay in your own tent, stay with your own belongings. But then also too, if you're there with another team, why aren't you there under your own tent with your own team preparing for your event? So the backstory coming from this witness is crucial. It's very crucial because it shows like this Anthony was the odd man in this other school's tent with their belongings. And for someone to tell you to move, it's not like Metcalf or Austin said, hey, I am going to delete you. I just want you to move. And you refuse to move. And I also saw on social media where people are saying, well, Anthony's bag was taken by Metcalf. Well, right here, we have a witness who was right there that says that Anthony had possession of his bag the entire time. And that's one of the points that I wanted to get out here as well. We can also use this as a training opportunity, because that's one thing that I've always noted with my law enforcement training. When I see someone going into a bag, if I can't see their hands, they're going for something. And Anthony definitely was hiding his hands. He was going for something. He had possession of his bag, and he was going in his bag to find a prohibited item. So in this event, had this been a situation or an area where you were allowed to have knives and things like that, Anthony producing a knife would have justified Austin Metcalf meeting or exceeding that, because as you see, a knife proved to be fatal. You know, they always say like never bring a knife to a gunfight or whatever like that. But in this situation, he brought a knife to an argument. And that was not, or it wasn't even, it was just an exchange. It wasn't, just an exchange. I want you to move. I want you to get out of our area. Okay. So yeah, anything with like self-defense or anything like that, I don't see that. And then to aim for someone's heart, that is the vital organ. It's a vital organ. Do that. I don't know. I don't know. This is really tragic. And just reading this and hearing what others were saying on social media trying to justify this is really crazy. This is really sad. This is really, really sad, because you see your athlete going to this event to highlight their skills, highlight what they've been practicing for so many years, months, weeks, to get here to display their very best. And this happens. It's very sad. I'm going to skip around. I mainly wanted to highlight those first few pages. We're going to jump down to the narrative of Officer Justin Newton. On 4/2/25, I responded to Texas Health Plano to assist with this case. I was tasked with meeting with the ambulance at the hospital. I arrived prior to the ambulance and waited for them to arrive. They arrived at 10:46 hours with the victim, Austin, we now know Metcalf, who was brought into the trauma bay for treatment. At 10:52 hours, Dr. Chow pronounced Austin deceased. Once he was pronounced, staff stopped treatment and disconnected the cords and tubes from the machines without removing anything from the body itself. While on scene, I took possession of the clothing worn by Austin and maintained possession of all items until CSI Dillard took them from me. While on scene, Officer Landon requested assistance in the lifting of the sheets off the body to take photos. This is making me very sad, so I'm not going to continue reading that, but I just wanted you to know that the further chain of custody was maintained. So the evidence was logged and the chain of custody was maintained. The narratives were very descriptive and stuff like that. But this other narrative by Officer Craig Thomas did really well in documenting the witnesses, getting their information, where they belong to, what school, and things like that. So that was really, really important. All in all, I just wanted to highlight this to show y'all and take a moment. All right, so going back to the KPIC4 news story, the article goes on to say that Karmelo Anthony has been held in the Collin County Jail on a $1 million bond. Now, there's been I don't think there's been enough talk about that while people have been posting on social media, is that this bond kind of seems outrageous. For him to be 17, he doesn't own any real estate or property or have any money in the bank to justify a $1 million bond. And I think that this here is outrageous. I think this violates his rights as well. So if anything, I am in support of Mr. Anthony receiving a lower bond and able to work with his attorneys to come up with his defense and stuff like that. I mean, this was a tragedy all the way around. Really, really sad. Really, really sad. However, it goes on to say the case has drawn national attention, sparking conversations about race. I did see the video of Austin Metcalf's father that states that, this is not about race. I've also seen photographs of different people on social media trying to paint this as, a race issue, showing pictures of Austin and his brother Hunter with hunting gear. I'm like, the brother's name was Hunter. In Texas, that's what they do in Texas. They hunt. I know there is this thing with like the wild pigs or something. So hunting is not illegal. Like, I don't get it. So another one I've seen about the race issue, and they're comparing Karmelo Anthony to Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks and fatally stabbed someone. This does not apply. Okay. Although this case has drawn national attention, sparking conversations on race, in the aftermath, the Anthony family reportedly received threats, which led to calls for a fair and unbiased investigation. It appears as though it's going to happen. So far in the police reports, and you can read the report in its entirety at your leisure, I did not see anyone that came up to speak for Anthony and try to justify his actions. I did not observe that. But everything seems to be fair. He was treated with respect. He wasn't, done wrong in any way that I read in the report. And with his picture, his booking photo, I didn't see him have any injuries to that sort. I didn't see any of that. Activist Dominique and Alexander, president of the Next Generation Action Network. Hey, this is Tieesha. After recording, and I'm editing my video, and I wanted to show y'all what I pulled up about this Dominique Alexander of this organization. So I want you to make sure that you do your due diligence and research before you follow behind these activists and their nonprofits and things like that. I haven't seen anybody make a video on that, but I just thought I'd throw it in this video for further research. Spoke out in defense of Anthony, urging the public to ensure that the investigation is conducted without racial bias or hate. I don't see what that has to do with anything. There wasn't any mention of Austin Metcalf making any statements or treating him any kind of way. It was, hey, you're in our tent. You need to leave. It was Anthony who went into his bag, and to me, it just appeared like he was looking for an altercation that day. And this did not have to go there. You can get up and move. And when people say, well, people have came on my post and said, hey, well, it was raining. I'm like, athletes are used to working out in the rain, being in the rain. As you see, he ran from the scene or left the scene in the rain. So unless it was raining lava, there was no reason to refuse to leave a stand. Quote, we've witnessed disturbing and hateful rhetoric in the aftermath of this tragedy, Alexander told NBC DFW. It is essential that Karmelo Anthony receives a fair trial free from prejudice and bigotry. The only thing I can see that's outrageous is the $1 million bond. That's a little outrageous. So let me know what you think about this. I'm excited to see your comments, and I just wanted to let you know that it is okay. It is okay to have a different view. You do not have to go along with what the majority of social media is pushing you to believe. I'm not saying anything racial going on. I think the police, the Frisco Police Department, did an excellent job of responding to this tragic incident. One thing I can say is being on patrol and going to an incident, especially an incident where a child is injured or that life is taken, that is hard. That is hard. So my heart goes out to the officers that had to respond and see this, maybe captured it on their video, had to take pictures of this, had to respond to the hospital, the crime scene investigators, the witnesses, the athletes. My heart goes out to you because this is something that no one wants to witness or go through and have to relive it. These officers and everyone involved is going to keep reliving this each time they see a news article, each time they get a subpoena to come to court. It's going to stick with them for a long time. And it's sad because there's now two young men who will not attend their proms, who won't attend their graduations. So this is tragic all the way around. And I just wish the best as the families heal and proceed on with the court dates and the aftermath of this tragedy. If you enjoyed this video, I welcome you to subscribe, check out my other videos, engage me in the comments, and I thank you for your time and I thank you for watching.